What's up, everybody? Welcome to this latest edition of No Mercy. I consider it a special edition myself, but I'll tell you that reason in just a minute. Obviously, I'm not coming from you from our regular studios, but it doesn't matter. It's always thanks to our official studio sponsor. That's why I always have a spot. It's called FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel is the official sports betting company of the No Mercy podcast. Also, gold is the silver bullet for protecting and building your wealth. Call my friends at Legacy Precious Metals at 866-257-3080. That's 866-257-3080. Or download your free investing kit by visiting them online at legacypminvestments.com. Let me not spend much time teasing this. I'm about to talk to an individual by the name of Clay Travis. If you listen to him, you'd think he's a right winger. Some of you would think he's lost his damn mind. Some of you would think he's the resident savior because Rush Limbaugh is gone and he is the successor to Rush Limbaugh. He's also a sports commentator, though. He's also somebody that's got a whole lot to say about a whole bunch of people, and it ain't always nice. But I'm a fair-minded man, and I wanted to give him an opportunity to talk about him. Since he's always talking about everybody else, I was very interested when I heard that Clay Travis was interested in sitting down with me. You'll find out why in a minute. You don't want to miss this interview, this one-on-one conversation. Clay Travis with Stephen A. Up next. Trust me, buckle up. You'll need your seatbelt for this one. Get ready to raise a glass and turn up the volume because Drink Champs is back. Join legendary Queens rapper turned show host Norray and Miami hip-hop pioneer DJ EFN as they drink, laugh, and chat with some of the biggest names in hip-hop and pop culture, with some of the most legendary guests like Derek Jeter, A$AP Rocky, Shaquille O'Neal, Kevin Hart. Drink Champs has got it all. Listen in as the host and guest engage in a night of boozy conversation and boisterous storytelling, focusing on and looking back at their paths to success, highlighting their lives, friendships, and iconic moments within their careers. In this unfiltered series, drinks are flowing and jokes are rolling. So tune in, take a seat at the table, and join the conversation with Drink Champs on the Interval Presents Podcast Network. Listen wherever you get your podcasts. We're out of the winter. We're in the middle of spring. These days are getting longer. The days are getting hotter. So we can't forget to chill. You hear me? I'm talking midweek happy hours with your coworkers. I'm talking sitting back and making some bets and watching sports with your friends. I'm talking an ice-cold Coors Light. That's right, the beer that's made to chill. Now, look, I'm not a huge drinker, in case you didn't know. I'm not crushing beers that the younger generation says. But when I crack open a Coors Light and I get that crisp refreshment of the Colorado Rockies, it hits the spot. It's what I want to chill with, whether I'm unwinding or experiencing a thrilling buzzer beater. It's a beer I want to share with others. In fact, if you listen to this podcast and follow my social media accounts, you know who I probably think needs to chill a little bit. Now, I'm not going to name names, but there are some people out there who could use a Coors Light. Stat. When you choose to chill, pair your plans with an ice-cold Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Drizzly or Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/mercy. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Did you know that last year the S&P 500 went down 20%? Bitcoin went down almost 60%. But gold not only didn't lose money, but went up a few percentage points. So far this year, gold has been steadily rising and silver is up almost 30% in the last 6 months. Experts predict gold will continue to skyrocket this year, and you don't want to miss out. That's because gold protects you from inflation and market volatility. Gold and silver should be a part of every balanced investment portfolio. Legacy Precious Metals is the company I trust when it comes to investing in precious metals. What I like about LPM is they have an education-first approach. Making investing decisions can be overwhelming, but their team takes the time to answer all your questions and give recommendations based on your personal situation. So call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-257-3080 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com to download your free investment guide. Don't leave your finances to chance. Be informed. Contact my friends at Legacy Precious Metals. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today on No Mercy is no stranger to controversy and will tell you what he thinks when it comes to sports, politics, or a myriad of other issues on the Outkick podcast or the Travis and Sexton radio show. Contrary to what he might believe, I don't dislike him. I really don't. You know, I mean, I was looking forward to having this conversation, to be quite honest with you. I'm talking about Mr. Clay Travis himself. What's going on, Clay? How are you, man? How's everything?
Hey, I'm great. And contrary to your opinions there to start, I actually super have respect for you. And I'll get into that for many reasons. But number one is, there are very few dudes or girls that can handle, as you well know, 3-4 hours of daily programming, whether it's yourself, Colin Cowherd, Skip Bayless. There are very few people who every day people will tune into and pay attention to. And I think people, you describe me as controversial. See, the crazy thing is, I think everything I say is 100% common sense. So what I would just say, first of all, I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited for this. I think we'll have a good time. But I'd just encourage everybody out there, kind of listen along. And I think they're going to be like, you know what? I actually agree with a lot of what he's saying. And I bet you're going to agree with a lot of what I'm saying as well. But let's dive in.
Damn it, you know what? That's too many damn appearances on Sean Hannity's show. Because that's exactly how he started off the interview. That's the kind of stuff that he says. I bet you'll agree with most of the stuff I say, Stephen. That's the kind of stuff that he says. And as you know, I've known him for years. Yep. But I want to ask you this question, because as a guy, I mean, you've got Outkick, you've got your show with Sexton, which, by the way, succeeded the late Mr. Rush Limbaugh. Now, I didn't agree with a lot of his politics. I didn't agree with some of his sensibilities, but there is no denying he was the elite radio host of our generation. Yeah. I don't give a damn what anybody says. He's one of the best to have ever done it. We can never take away the EIB network and what he was able to do with that. How is it for you succeeding him? Let's start off right there.
Well, first of all, you don't ever succeed a legend. And you're right. Regardless of what opinions you may have, I think there are two legendary of our generation radio voices, Howard Stern and Rush Limbaugh.
Yes.
I think that's 1-2, and you can argue about others, but I think that's 1-2 right now. And so I'll be honest with you. I felt as if it were like taking over for Nick Saban after he retires or Bill Belichick after he retires. You usually want to be the guy who comes after the guy, right? Somebody else comes in. They're not able to live up to that legacy, and then you move on. It was a challenge. I like new challenges. I think our boss, who I think you know, Julie Talbot at iHeart, was incredibly smart. She said, I'm going to put you and Buck Sexton on together because that way one person is not supposed to replace Rush, and nobody's ever going to replace him, but the show will sound different. And we're 2 years in, and I think, she wants to sign us for the next 10 or 15 years if she could. So it's been a good start. I love it. I love the fact, and I bet you would appreciate this as well, I feel privileged because I get to say exactly what I think every day. My wife says that's why I don't need therapy. In this era where I feel like everybody has to tiptoe up to what they believe or what they feel they can say, I say exactly what I think. And at the end of the day, I've got no weight on my shoulders, and I go and I take care of my kids, and that's my life.
Is that the reason or the primary reason why you took that challenge? Because you knew that you'd have the freedom? Because obviously doing radio, and by the way, just as an aside, it doesn't get much better than Julie Talbot. I've known her for over a decade. She is one of the greatest women I've ever known. I would ask you, did that play a role, meaning the freedom to just say whatever it is that you want to say without having to worry too much about repercussions in a lot of people's eyes? Is that the number one reason you took this job?
I think you can't be successful unless you believe you can say exactly what you think. And I bet you would agree with this. Authenticity, I think, is the single most important thing in our business today. You may not agree with everything, but you have to believe that the person who's talking to you is to being as truthful as he can or she can on a day-to-day basis. So the reason why, I'll be honest with you, I was doing early morning radio, and I know you've had some experience with early morning radio.
Yes. Oh, Lord. Yes, I did.
I was getting up every morning at 4:15, 4:30 a.m. I was live solo 6 to 9 a.m. East Coast every day. And when COVID happened, I didn't take any days off. March, April, May, June of 2020, my audience skyrocketed. And Julie came to me after the late, great Rush Limbaugh passed, and she said, as much influence as you can have with this morning sports talk radio show, and you're doing great, you can do it for years and years to come. I am offering you the opportunity to take over the biggest radio show in the country most people would crawl on their hands and knees for this opportunity. You are unsure because I loved what I was doing already. And one side of life lesson I have, Stephen A, is don't mess with happy. If you love what you're doing, don't be, constantly chasing something else. I'm very happy, but the opportunity, like I mentioned, my 3 boys, I started to think about the things that matter. It's great. I wish my Tennessee Titans one day would win the Super Bowl. I know you probably wish at some point that your beloved Knicks would win another NBA title.
Yes.
But our lives are not going to change if our favored teams win a championship. We're still going to show up the next day and talk about it. Whether or not schools were open during COVID, that mattered. Whether my kids are able to live in an America where they have tremendous opportunity and can hopefully, like every parent out there, I want them to be able to do more and have more success than I have, just like my own parents did. That matters. And that plus the freedom to say whatever I wanted on any topic was why I ultimately couldn't say no to it.
Let me go to you on a personal level, just so everybody can know. And I want to make sure that I'm accurate before, just to highlight, let people know who you are. First of all, you're a writer. You started out as a lawyer in the Virgin Islands. Is that true?
That's correct.
Where? Which island?
St. Thomas.
Do you realize that's where my family's from?
Oh, that's amazing. So
my aunt was the lieutenant governor. My uncle was the chief of police. I have both of my parents. My mother was born, God rest her soul, she was born in St. Thomas. My father was born in Antigua. I've got about 70 remaining living relatives that live in St. Thomas and St. Croix.
Well, so I loved it. I mean, it's it is truly America's paradise. And so I wasn't that excited. You're right. I was not that excited about being a lawyer. I loved law school. I liked the learning of it. I went to Vanderbilt for law school, and the managing partner of the firm in St. Thomas was a Vanderbilt lawyer. And so they were recruiting. And I went down there and I practiced, and I think it truly is, as you well know, if people have not been there. I think it is the most beautiful place under the United States flag. Beaches, the likes of which people cannot imagine. St. John's is a 15-minute boat ride over Red Hook. Right. Tortola is only 25 minutes away. Puerto Rico is only a half-hour flight. I love San Juan, Puerto Rico. I think it is an amazing place. We would go there. That was like New York City for the Caribbean. British Virgin Islands are beautiful as well. And so I practiced law. And while I was practicing law there, I started writing online. I had what I would call basically a quarter life crisis. That was not in existence now. I know a lot of 25, 26-year-olds experience it now, but I was in a law office and I looked around and I thought to myself, I'm going to spend the rest of my life in legal proceedings. And that's not what I love. That wasn't my passion. There's a lot of worse jobs. Trust me, I've had them, and it did not pay poorly. I made more. Both of my parents never made $50,000 a year. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee.
Same here.
So I made more than either of my parents had ever made the first day that I was practicing law. So I didn't grow up with money. It wasn't like it was an ambition, but I knew if I was going to be successful, I had to be super passionate. I had to want to get out of bed and go full speed every day. And I didn't have that with the practice of law. So I came back. I continued to practice law in Nashville. I'm still licensed in the USVI and in Tennessee. I practiced for a while, but I slowly started to move into the writing world. And I initially started writing about Southern college football, the SEC, which is one of my passions.
Wasn't that for CBS?
I did. I wrote CBS Sports. Initially for no money while I was practicing law full time, just as a passion. And that eventually led to the point where I could start to make a living. And that led into radio, which I also love. It's a huge passion. And then they let me on TV, and I love all 3 of them. And I like to think that I'm pretty good at all 3, as I would say. I imagine you do as well. And one of my early idols, Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon, I would read them. I went to college in D.C. I would read them in the Washington Post. And when PTI started, I said, my God, these guys I would listen to Tony's show. Wilbon was a regular guest on the radio. I said, I want to be like these guys. I want to be a triple threat. I want to be good at writing, good at radio, good at TV. That was sort of the aspiration that I had as a young guy starting off in this business 20 some odd years ago.
Now, you've been a writer and an editor at Deadspin, correct?
Yep.
And then you were a national columnist at Fan House, correct, right?
Yep.
Is that correct? Now, one could ask you, because Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon are friends of mine. Love them to death, look up to them, admired them, and revered them for decades, for crying out loud. And when we look at Clay Travis, and one of the things that I want to preface this whole discussion, this whole interview about, because I'm going to ask you about sports, I'm going to ask you about politics. Me commentating about something, giving my opinion about something is entirely different than when I interview. Like, I'm talking to you right now, I'm interviewing you. It's your time to explain you and what you think. I'm not here to pass judgment about it. I'm going to listen to what you have to say, Clay. That's what I'm going to do, okay? So when you bring up Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser, when people have seen Clay Travis in the past, or they look at Outkick, which you own now and what have you, and they see the critical eye that you attach to things, Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon, that's probably your standard because you revered them, you looked up to them. When people look at you and they feel like you're critical, that you call it like you see it, but they may not agree with you or what have you, what role does a Tony Kornheiser and a Michael Wilbon, in terms of the vision they set in your head about what the industry should be about and what it should be like, what role did they play in influencing you in terms of your judgment about what you see from others?
Massively, I think. I mean, look, and I appreciate the way you preface this, because maybe I need to have you on and I'll interview you and you can off on everything.
I'll come on.
But we'll do a home and home at some point here.
Yeah.
But to me, what I've always said, and by the way, I sold Outkick 2 years ago to Fox. So Fox now owns Outkick. But
yes, sir.
What I found works is smart, original, funny, and authentic. If you can put all four of those things into a piece of content, radio, TV, writing, it's a home run. It's hard to be all four of those things every day. I will tell you, when I was a kid in college and I would go get the Washington Post, every time that I picked up the Washington Post and I read a Mike Wilbon or a Tony Kornheiser column, they had all four of those things in them. And that, to me, is the aspirational standard. Smart, original, funny, and authentic. You want to challenge people. And you know this as a columnist and as someone, an opinion that everybody agrees with is not actually a remotely interesting opinion, right?
Totally agree.
And a lot of people out there, I feel like in this social media world that we've created, there's a rush to consensus. Everybody has to have the same opinion. And to me, that's the antithesis of the media environment, especially in sports, that I grew up a part of, where I would devour newspapers, right? I still get the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal delivered in print to my house every day. And I like to read the print copy. But when I was in college, they're trying to get college kids to read. And my friends would make fun of me, but I would read the USA Today, Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Every day, all four of those newspapers, I would just devour all of the opinion that was in there.
Okay.
And I like divergent opinions. So I enjoy reading
the
New
York
York Times and the Wall Street Journal editorial pages. But those guys, that's the standard, right? I think they are the two best national newspaper columnists that I have ever read in my entire life. And so for me, as a young kid, that's the person I would look at and say, man, I want to be able to be as good as those guys are at what they do someday.
But is that a bit harsh from this perspective? People who don't measure up to them.
Yeah.
Okay. They may be very good, may be very talented, smart and funny, obviously authentic. You know, you take all of those things into consideration. They may be those things and they may truly believe. I'm talking about any journalist out there. They may truly believe what they're saying, and it just happens to flow with the consensus as opposed to somebody lacking the courage to deviate from the consensus. Do you ever take that into consideration?
Yeah, look, what I've always said is I'm not a guy who looks over my shoulder. And what I mean is I tell you exactly what I think, and I don't look to see who's lining up behind me one way or the other. And I try in my mind to have a consistent perspective, right? So if you read me 10 years ago or listen to me and you listen to me today, I like to believe you could go back and there would be almost like a judge, a consistency of opinion. And so, my wife says she didn't listen to my radio show.
Wife Laura, right? That's her name, Laura, right?
Got 3 kids. She's an amazing mom. She says she couldn't listen to my radio show for a long time because we would have conversations and she would say, you can't say that on the radio. And what I found is the more often I said the exact same thing that I would sitting at our kitchen table or out in the bar on the radio, the bigger the audience got, because I connected with that audience in a way that did not seem like there was pretension associated with it. And so I think that is the key. That's why I come back to smart, original, funny, and authentic. Over time, I think if people listen and pay attention, you may get attention, and you well know this. Somebody, you have one take and it pops, and several million people might get exposed to it, but it's just a part and parcel of what you would say on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes those things that'll pop, people say, oh, a lot of people disagree with you or whatever else, but they'll listen and maybe they come back and they're like, oh, over time, I'm sure you've seen that Alonzo Mourning gif or meme where he's sitting on the bench and he's shaking his head, and then eventually he starts to say yes. That's how I think audiences are if you are consistent and honest with them. Even if they initially come in and they may not like you, over time they come to respect that there is a consistency to what you produce.
But where's the acknowledgement and the sensitivity to the fact that some people might get away with it, some people might not? Like the things that Clay Travis said, like, for example, the person that you succeeded, Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh could say things on the air that a lot of people couldn't. Yeah. But he was Rush Limbaugh and he could get away with it. You know, Clay Travis, in some people's eyes, can say things and get away with it that other people cannot get away with. They'll lose their job. I mean, does Clay Travis have any sensitivity to that, to the fact that you sit on a perch to some degree? I don't mean it literally, you know that. But I'm saying you sit in a position where, because you're you, and because of what you've established for yourself, the relationships you've cultivated, the business relationships that you have, you're in a position to get away with some things that other people can't. If they tried saying something like that, they can't pull that off, Clay Travis. Well, have you developed any sensitivity to acknowledging that reality?
Oh, I mean, I think you just have to go through the fire. People try to cancel you all the time.
Yeah, they do.
You remember this? I'm sure you've seen this clip. I went on CNN, right, and I was defending Jamel Hill's First Amendment rights, by the way, when it was controversial. I like Jamel. I think she's smart. I think but she's made some decisions that I would disagree with. But I believe she should be able to say everything under the sun.
She's a friend of mine. She's a friend of mine. Yes,
and I respect her ability to say whatever she believes. Right? I was defending her on CNN actually when this thing blew up. Told my wife, "Hey, we're going to take the boys out for pizza. I just got to do this quick interview with CNN Friday afternoon. Let's just give me 5 minutes. We're going to be good to go." I said on that show with Brooke Baldwin was hosting. She said, I said, I only believe in two things 100%. I've been saying it on my radio. I've been writing on my columns for years. I said, only two things that have never let me down: the First Amendment and boobs, right? So they never
what was that second one?
Boobs. B-O-O-B-S. She spelled that. I said, look, I'm a heterosexual man.
Right.
And cleavage never let me down. I'm not going to. And she was outraged, right, that I would say that. Now, to be fair, I've been saying that because if you say you're a First Amendment absolutist, a lot of people don't really understand what that means. Right?
Explain it. What does it mean to you?
Yeah. So I'm like, I believe in the 100% in the marketplace of ideas. And, in the Hugh Hefner context, right? Playboy back in the day, it was ironic. He died a few weeks later and CNN said he was a hero. Mm-hmm. But my wife, the minute that interview was over, because the CNN wanted me to apologize, it blew up. It was the #1 trending subject in America. They wanted me to apologize. They said I was all these things. My wife texted me and said, do I need to put the house on the market? I mean, that's literally, when you look down, your wife has just texted you after a television interview, do I need to put the house on the market? You're like, oh, so much for that pizza with the kids, right?
Right.
But the reason why I believe I can say what I have said and continue to say is because I don't apologize, right? Because I believe that when people demand that you apologize, that's not a good faith effort. I've been married almost 20 years, Stephen A. I apologize all the time or I would not have stayed married, right?
That's right. I was getting ready to go there. I was getting ready to say, don't lie to my audience and act like you didn't apologize. You're married. You damn sure apologize to your wife.
Hey, you can argue that my entire marriage is just one long, right?
Right.
So I'm not saying I don't apologize. But when people are coming at you and demanding that you apologize, I think it's BS because it's not good faith. What they want to do is diminish you and attack you and delegitimize you. And your audience, and I mean your audience, my audience, everybody's audience, when you take a knee when you bend the knee and apologize for something that you have been saying for years, they know that you are dishonest and they won't have your back anymore. And I'll give you a great line.
Okay.
Charles Barkley is a great dude who's come through, right? Charles Barkley can say anything, right?
Okay.
Charles Barkley, a friend of mine, he told me years ago, he said, Clay, if you worry about the people who don't like you, then the people who do like you won't like you anymore. And I think that's so perfect in this social media age, because there's a lot of people who are constantly cowering. They're fearful. They're afraid of saying what they really believe. And when that occurs, they can smell that weakness. It's like a shark with blood in the water. Mm-hmm. They will come and they will take you. Look, and another thing is, if people come after me, I go back just as hard. And I think there's a fear sometimes because people get used to like that kind of cowering and being in a curled up fetal position. That's not me. I'll say exactly what I
see. Here's the thing that's interesting about what you're saying, Clay. I can sit here and act otherwise, but I won't do that. I agree with you. I get where you're saying. I don't think you're wrong in terms of what you just explained. Apologizing for the sake of somebody making you feel compelled to apologize. Yep. I agree with that. But what I want to say is, what if you realize off of what someone else is saying that indeed you might have been wrong? What if you realize that, you know what, I kind of messed up here. I didn't really mean it that way. And not only that, I got to rethink that because I'm wrong. Or let me take it a step further. You said you have 3 wonderful kids.
Yep.
What about the kind of imagery and that you want to project to them in terms of being able to fess up when you're wrong? Because you certainly don't want them to lie to you, or you don't want them to hold on to something just because they said it and dad and mom are telling them they're wrong, but damn it, I said it, so I'm going to hold on to it and I ain't going to apologize. You don't want that, do you?
No, 100%. And
okay.
I think, look, the most important thing in my life is my 3 boys, right? And so I am old school a little bit in this context. The only thing I really am concerned about is my wife and my 3 boys, the people inside of my physical house.
Okay.
I say all the time, there is all sorts of external issues going on in the world. I've got a 15-year-old, I've got a 12-year-old, I've got an 8-year-old, 3 boys. My job is to raise them into the best men that I can in, let's be honest, a world that doesn't really like men at times. And I bet that you can feel that too, even though I don't know that you are a father, but raising them into productive husbands, dads, hopefully, in their own life is what I focus on a lot. So to your point, I have always said, I'm not opposed to apologies if I get something wrong. I do 15 hours of live radio on the biggest radio show in the country, just about. I so far have not said anything that was wrong, but if I get a fact wrong, we immediately come back on the show and say, hey, by the way, this is wrong. And I'll give you an example. I work as hard as I can to get my facts right. And let me explain why. I feel like we live in a country now that is focused so much on the end argument that oftentimes the factual foundation of an argument does not matter. And I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If I came out to you and I said, hey, I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to win the Super Bowl this coming year, 2023 going into 24.
Okay.
You may or may not agree with me. You might say, hey, Josh Allen's stepping up. Who knows? We'll see what happens with Joe Burrow. We'll see what happens with Lamar Jackson. There's a lot of really good AFC quarterbacks, right? Mm-hmm. Any number of arguments you can make against Patrick Mahomes. But if I said to you, I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to win the Super Bowl because he's never won a Super Bowl before,
yes,
you can have the same opinion as me, but you should trust me less because my facts are wrong. Mm-hmm. What I see happening too much in this country is there are factual inaccuracies that make arguments bad. And so when I get something wrong on a fact, and I get my audience, I apologize to them. I said, you know what? I should have never done this. March 2020, this is something I got 100% wrong. I own it. I looked at the COVID data that China was sharing, and I tried to extrapolate it to America, and China lied to us. And I trusted that data, and it made my factual early opinions in March and April of 2020 not as good as they should have been. And I went and I apologized to my audience. I said, I shouldn't have trusted these numbers coming out of China. I was wrong. I think your audience will respect when you acknowledge that you were wrong. What they don't respect is when they believe that you are just trying to preserve yourself. And look, the reality.
Let me interject. Because
Yeah.
there's a point. Let me say this. The audience respects it if the level of adamance and vehemence that you articulated and expressed when you thought you were right equals the same when you recognize you're wrong.
Correct.
If you're loud and outspoken and adamant when you believe you're right, but then you're timid and quiet when you're wrong, or you dedicate a week to a subject when you think you're right, but you dedicate 2 minutes when you're wrong, that's an inconsistency there, Clay, right?
Correct. And look, there are look, we're in the prediction business. How many years in a row did you get the finals wrong?
6 years. No, listen, you're talking to me, Clay. I knew you would have that information. You're damn right. I had reasons for it. I didn't know about the injuries. I didn't know that Greg Popovich would bench Tim Duncan, for a key rebound. Yeah, I didn't know a lot. I didn't know that LeBron James would fold in the fourth quarter against Jason Terry, for crying out loud. I didn't know these things were going to happen. So that's absolutely true.
So I'll give you one from me.
Right. Okay.
I said the Alabama dynasty was over. My 12-year-old has grown into a huge University of Alabama fan. He's on YouTube recently, and he's going through, and it's like an Alabama hater YouTube compilation. Mm-hmm. And he comes to me, and he's like, Dad, watch this. And it's just somebody savaging me because I was 100% wrong about like 6 or 7 years ago. I thought Alabama's dynasty was over, right?
Right.
So I live that, right? And I think we're being held accountable. But being right or wrong, and by the way, you're an entertainer. I respect that. We are in the world of sports. Sports is the toy chest of life. I don't worry so much about being wrong with opinions on sports. Right? I did a gambling show for 4 years with Fox Bet, right? On FS1.
It's a pretty damn good show. I always watch. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and by the way, everybody who gambles on any sport is wrong all the time. But we got every day. They would come back and they'd be like, hey, I think at one point I lost 14 baseball bets in a row. Do you know how hard it is to go 0-14 picking baseball games? It's virtually impossible. I managed to do it.
So listen, you say all of that, and I'm getting where you're coming from. But when I think about now, because what you said is sports, and now you've transitioned into something far deeper. You're talking about real life issues a lot of times. You've been, and I'm not getting into any details because I don't have time to pick up every damn story, for crying out loud, and echo everything that everybody has said about, so many people rather have said about you. But you're controversial in your own right. You've been accused of engaging with conspiracy theories and stuff like that. That's entirely different from sports. That's real life issues. When people look at Clay Travis, what do you want them to know about you as it pertains to really, really addressing the serious issues that affect us all? It could be COVID. It could be the murder of Tyree Nichols in Memphis. It could be the shooting that just took place in Tennessee. It could be what you've said as it pertains to attention being brought to bear on police brutality, but not enough on black crime, just to use that as an example.
Yep.
You've touched on all of these things, and it's ruffled a lot of feathers. What do you say to people that really question your level of sensitivity and your facts on some of those issues?
My facts are all right. You can certainly question my level of sensitivity. I'm old school in the sense that I'm sticks and stones may break your, bones, but words will never hurt you. That's the way that I was raised. That's the way that I raised my kids. I am 100% First Amendment first. Make all the arguments you want. Get your facts right. That's what I try to do. Second part, I'm 100% opposed to cancel culture. I think if we had real, honest, legitimate conversations, you may think, people out there listening right now, they may be like, man, I disagree with Clay Travis 100% on this issue. I would be like, that's fine. Let's, tap beer glasses. I bet there are 4 other things that we could find that we have common ground on.
Okay.
But to me, that's what sports used to represent. I think very much sports has become identity politics by another name. And that's one of the things that bothers me the most is sports used to be 80s, 90s, 2000s, by and large, in my experience. When you were out in an arena, when you were in a stadium and your favored team won. So this is back when the Knicks actually won, Stephen A.
Yes, don't remind me. Go ahead. 1999, yes.
You would turn around and you would high five everybody around you, and you wouldn't care about their race, their gender, who they voted for president. I'm old school in the sense that I'm the Jordan era, right? I'm the Tiger Woods era. I am the Bo Jackson era. I didn't care about any of those guys other than their excellence. And sports is, to me, the best man or best woman wins, no matter who your daddy is, no matter where you grew up. And now I got to look around and it's like the best man who identifies as a woman is suddenly a women's champion. And I just fundamentally reject that.
Well, I definitely agree with you from the standpoint I'm against cancel culture.
Yep.
You are absolutely right. We agree on that. But let me ask you this just for clarification. Define what cancel culture is to Clay Travis.
To me, cancel culture is the difference between I disagree with you and here's why. That is not cancel culture. That's the First Amendment. That's the marketplace of ideas. I wholeheartedly support it. Cancel culture is I disagree with what you said, and you no longer deserve to be able to make a living doing what you do.
Yes.
Yes. Cancel culture. And that, by the way,
we agree.
Whether you're in media like us or whether you are, just some random person who goes on Facebook and posts something and you are an employee and all of a sudden you can't do your job anymore. I think we should have real conversations, but I am opposed. And I was consistent. That's the argument I was making at CNN when everybody tried to cancel me. I was comparing Jamel Hill and her opinions on Donald Trump. She called him, a white supremacist, I think. And I said, look, I think she should be able to say that. But I similarly think that Kurt Schilling, who now works at Outkick, but that he should be able to say, hey, I don't agree with this transgender agenda, and particular when they're doing it off the air, right? I think that you should be able to share opinions. It's different if you're broadcasting it on FS1, by the way, or ESPN. Nobody who ever watched my sports gambling show had any idea what I thought about politics, right? They're just there to say who's going to win the Super Bowl, who's going to win the NBA.
So in other words, if somebody says something off camera, and that's how they feel, okay, but they were saying it off camera, they shouldn't be prevented from working on camera about something totally unrelated to what they said. That's what your belief is.
That's my belief. And by the way, I think that Kurt Schilling's opinion on who the starting pitcher should be in the World Series is impacted by what he thinks about the transgender agenda, or if you think that Jamel's opinion on who the best quarterback in the NFL is impacted by what she thinks about Trump, I would agree with that. And I would say both should be entitled to the full-fledged opinions of their lives, both public and private.
I'm going to do you a favor. I ain't going to tell you what I feel about Kurt Schilling. I'm going to leave that alone. That's for another day. Clay Travis. Let me go ahead.
Agree with him, but you don't dispute that he deserves to be able to say whatever he thinks, right?
I think everybody should be allowed to say whatever they think. Me personally speaking, I think there's a level of responsibility that we have to have because of folks, especially young folks that we're influencing. I think the platform that you say it on matters. I definitely think that, but I am totally against cancel culture. I think that a lot of times you have a lot of people out here, as Chris Rock said it best in his latest stand-up, when he talked about once upon a time you used to want to get ahead by working your tail off and being the best that you can be. Now you just wait for somebody to mess up. That seems to be, and I totally agree with him with that. Let me transition to woke culture. What is your definition of woke culture?
Yeah.
I'm interested in knowing because I don't know if I can give a definitive definition about woke culture. So I'm going to ask you, Clay.
Yeah, to me, woke culture is identity politics matters more than anything else. So before you would look at the facts, Lady Justice is blind. Right? There's a reason why the scales of justice, this is me going a little bit legal, but there's a reason why the scales of justice are blind. Because as soon as you allow yourself to be influenced by the identity of someone, and you are ranking basically hierarchies of victimization based on identity, that is things that people are not choosing. You didn't choose to grow up a black guy. I didn't choose to grow up a white guy. We both ended up somewhat similarly in the opinion business. I find your race and your gender, personally, to be the least interesting part of your opinion because it's something that you did not choose. So when you, and I think sports, unfortunately, has been infiltrated this way, but when you, with woke culture, you start off with a pyramid of victimization. And so everything is analyzed through the prism of that. And I'll give you an easy example in the world of sports. How much different would the Deshaun Watson case, right? He has not been charged with a crime. I want to make that clear. But I believe there are 30 women who have accused him of sexual assault.
Yes, that is correct.
I've defended murders. I've defended guys accused of domestic assault. I've defended drug dealers. I'm not a judge guy, right? If you go back, in fact, on the consistency, I think one of the worst decisions ever made in sports was this idea of Roger Goodell that the NFL should be a judge, jury, and executioner, and be punishing guys for things that they did 100% not connected to football itself. I'm probably the foremost critic early in those days of that. I continue to despise it, period, right? I think teams should be able to decide to employ whoever they want as long as they're not in prison, okay? But how would Deshaun Watson have been covered if Deshaun Watson, instead of Deshaun Watson, every fact is the exact same, except it had been Josh Allen? I would submit to you that the number one criticism would have been, oh, look at this white quarterback, Josh Allen. He can be accused of sexually assaulting 30 different women, avoid criminal charges, and sign the biggest contract in the history of football. Nobody has ever gotten more guaranteed money than Deshaun Watson. Now, I think the reason why that happened is because the ultimate rule of sports is your talent determines everything. And I'll give you an example again. If Colin Kaepernick had taken a knee, if Aaron Rodgers had taken a knee during the national anthem and said, you know what, I support ISIS. I think America's being too tough on Muslim terrorists. You know what would have happened? He would have still gotten to keep playing because he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league. I think the reason Deshaun Watson got paid is because the Haslams and the Browns decided they were desperate to pay a quarterback who was elite. They believe he's elite. But if Josh Allen had done everything the exact same, the number one story in sports media would have been, look at this white quarterback. He can get away with anything.
Well, but see, and I'm not necessarily saying that I disagree with you, but I think to use that example, I think the story is incomplete, and we're certainly not trying to throw Josh Allen's name out there because he's never been accused of such a thing. And I understand. Yeah, I know you wasn't saying that. I know you weren't saying that. I just want to make sure I clarified that for our listeners and viewers. But I will say this: I think the reason why it would have been a big story had it went down that way is because the society that we're living in would have questioned whether or not it would have been the same kind of treatment he received. Would that have been accorded to someone from the black community or the minority community? That's what people would have. I think that in our society, Clay, one of the things that, and I've often said this, and this is quite a bad example, and I noticed, but I've often said this, so I'm certainly not going to deny you from hearing what I said. I don't want anybody to get killed. I don't want anybody to be harmed. I don't want anything like that. But the real issue in our society is what people perceive to be as inequality. If everybody, I'll confess this to you, Clay. I went up to a couple of white police officers and I said this to them one day. I said, I never say police brutality. I say brutality on the part of some police officers because I don't want to castigate all of them. I always make sure to make that distinction, right? But I also said to them, it's pretty hard to explain to us how an unarmed black man can get shot. But we could see somebody in Oklahoma City running away from the cops and shooting at them while they're running away. We could see a guy like Dylan Brooks, who killed 9 people in South Carolina, get arrested and they stop him at Burger King to give him some food. But somehow, some way, a black individual that is unarmed gets shot. Now, if everybody of every ethnicity was getting shot by police officers, then then it would be different. But when it seems like this is specified for one race of people, that's where it becomes problematic.
All right,
you see what I'm saying?
Hit you with a response to that because I think.
Sure, please.
I believe we live in a world where whatever you believe, I think this is social media. There is an anecdotal story to support it. Right? Doesn't matter what it is. It can be something serious like police misconduct. It can be something not very serious like Kyrie Irving saying, hey, I don't think we went to the moon or whatever else, right? There's a video out there on the internet that you could find that would support it, right? I think Kyrie Irving, what did he say? The earth is flat?
Yes. That's what he said. Yeah. That's what he said. Yes.
So
go ahead.
The data on police shootings, for instance, 75% of people over the last 7 years who have been shot and killed by police in this country are white, Asian, or Hispanic. 25% are black. Now, you can, and you can go look it up, Washington Post database.
Okay. I'll look it up.
So now you can argue black population, 12 or 13%. So black
13
shot at a higher rate, right? If you say 25%, which is roughly numbers reflect. But then I think you have to go into violent crime. The other thing I think is interesting here is no one ever argues the police are sexist, but almost everybody police shoot dudes, right? And almost everybody they arrest. Most people, grandmas, are not out there creating very much of a stir, right? So my point on that, and it ties in perfectly to me with the Colin Kaepernick thing. If Colin Kaepernick had come out and said, you know what, I believe there's far too much violence in this country. I think police are shooting way too many people, white, Asian, black, and Hispanic. I think the response to that conversation would have been far different because it would have been universal and not identity politics driven. And on the Kaepernick thing, and I'm curious what you would think about this. I always so when you're a lawyer, you basically deal in hypotheticals all the time, right? Because fact patterns change and you can go from, oh, that person's guilty to that person is not guilty, right? What do you think the reaction would have been if Colin Kaepernick had decided during the national anthem as a San Francisco 49er to take a knee because he thought gay marriage shouldn't be legal?
Oh, Lord. I think it would. I actually think it would have been worse.
So
I think in this day and age, it might have been worse because one of the things that I've talked about, obviously racism is still pertinent and it matters, of course. But I think that when people look at homophobia, transphobia, misogynism and stuff like that, I do believe that has really, the sensitivities to those issues have heightened and gained a significant level of traction compared to the black-white issue. I do believe that.
I agree with, and by the way, in San Francisco in particular, which is a city that certainly, it's not Dallas, right? It's not, Tampa. It's San Francisco, which is a monster gay population, right? And so the way I talked about it, and I heard very few people having this discussion, was I said, look, you're entitled to any opinion, as I said before. But when you are in uniform at work, if I went into McDonald's, I love McDonald's, right? I went in to go get a Big Mac. And I went up to the counter and I ordered a Big Mac. And the McDonald's worker said, meats murder. I'd be like, I want this dude fired, right? Because I want to come in and order a hamburger. I don't want anybody lecturing me about the global environment or methane or anything. I just want a hamburger, dude. So to me, what was so fascinating about Kaepernick is people said, oh, I'm defending his First Amendment rights, which I would mention in uniform at work, totally different than him saying with his social media profiles or whatever else, whatever he agreed. Think about how much different the conversation is if he takes a knee and just says, in uniform at work, I don't think gay people should be able to get married. The same people who are like, Colin Kaepernick's a hero would have said, this dude should never be able to play in the NFL again. And by the way, some of the people who said Colin Kaepernick shouldn't play in the NFL again, or what he was taking a knee for, would have said, oh, he's opposed to gay marriage. This guy's a hero, right? My point is we need uniform standards. And what I try to do is respond the same way. I don't want, if I'm an employer, I don't want my employee at uniform, at work, alienating any of my audience because I want everybody.
But as a white guy, Clay, you do understand black folks have been clamoring for universal standards forever. I mean, that is something something that we've lamented. I mean, you know that, right?
Yeah, we agree. Look, I went to Martin Luther King. I graduated from a high school named after Martin Luther King, and in an inner city part of Nashville.
Okay.
So I'm not unaware of the arguments. In fact, that is one of my primary arguments is judge people as individuals as opposed to as part of groups, because I think oftentimes, I'll give you another example, just happened. LSU, Iowa. The reaction to that story, if you have two white girls or two black girls, story vanishes, right? That was I believe, primarily racial-driven response in many ways that would not have existed if there were two black individuals involved or two white individuals involved. And so I'm more interested in the individual than I am in the identity with it.
Let me get to your politics in this regard. You voted for Barack Obama not once, but twice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You voted for him, and you said at the time, you previously, you said in 2020, when you announced that you were voting for Donald Trump, you said you had never voted Republican before then.
Correct.
So when people listen to you on the radio, or they read your stuff and with Outkick, or they see you on Fox News because you contribute to Fox News. I've seen you on Hannity with his crazy self. I mean, you know that's my man, but I think he's crazy. You know that, but that's all right though. That's right. He knows I think he's crazy.
There were more of that. He's my guy, but I think he's crazy. Like my wife would say, he's my husband, but I think he's crazy on something.
Yeah, that happens. But what do you say to people that says about Clay Travis. How the hell did you get to this point? If you never voted for Republican, you never voted for Republican in your life until 2020. How did you become this guy who I'm not going to call you a right winger or anything like that. I mean, I don't believe most of us live on the fringes. You know, the reality, you're entitled to your beliefs and your opinions. I'm not here to question that. All I'm asking is, how did you get to a point where you were a guy that voted for Barack Obama twice, never voted for a Republican, to succeeding Rush Limbaugh and being considered a prominent voice for the right? I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so first of all, Obama 2008 would be a Republican campaign now. If you go back and look at Obama 2008, what was the number one narrative, number one story that he sold? He sold, even me, a mixed race kid from Hawaii with a funky name, can grow up to be the president of the United States.
Okay.
That was not very different than Bill Clinton 1992, which
Fair.
I'm a kid from Hope, Arkansas, single parent. I'm not supposed to be here. So Obama 2008, to me, and this is interesting, Stephen A., it's the only presidential campaign that both parties in 21st century accepted was one, right? Every other one, there's like a tiny little twitch. You can say, oh, if more people showed up in Ohio or whatever. Obama 2008, I think, was the best campaign that anybody has run in the 21st century. Okay? And let me explain why.
Social media.
To me, Obama represented America is the greatest country that's ever existed in the history of the world. And he attracted lots of people who were white, Hispanic, Asian, that message, new residents, recent immigrants, it resonated. Because everybody wants to believe, to your point, that any kid that's born today, regardless of their mom or dad, regardless of where they start, could end up president of the United States. That was Obama's message. I think that what happened was the Democrats, they undervalued how incredibly talented of a politician Barack Obama was. And they took as his legacy, we have to have a minority on the ticket or a woman. Hillary Clinton in 2016, I voted for Gary Johnson, as I've said publicly, the libertarian. I did not vote for Trump or Hillary in 16. Hillary Clinton ran, what was her message? I'm with her. It's time to break the glass ceiling. You should vote for me because I'm a woman. And I think the lesson that Democrats took from Barack Obama was not I'd love to hear Obama himself address this because I think they've undervalued him. It's like if you suddenly looked at Michael Jordan or LeBron James and didn't take them as the supreme talents that they are, and instead argued, oh, well, this is the message is just we should drive to the basket more or we should dunk the ball more. Well, those guys are really good at that, right? Like it's rare. And so I believe I've stayed basically the exact same. Stephen A., what I see by and large for the cancel culture community, I defend comedians, right? The idea that Kevin Hart couldn't host the Oscars, to me, because he made a few jokes that people didn't like back in the day, indefensible, right? I have stayed right kind of in the middle. I was always kind of right.
So you're just saying it was indefensible. They wouldn't allow him to host Oscars.
100 billion %. Man,
okay.
I've taken an analogy for a long time. If you drove past a comedy club and you saw a dude standing outside with a poster board and he was saying, protesting the comedian inside, what would you probably do as you drove past?
Yeah.
You would shake your head and be like, that guy's a loser.
That's right.
Yet that guy would have driven to the comedy club. He would have gotten a poster board. He would have written on it. He would have stood outside in the rain, the snow, the whatever it is to hold up. And you would have known who he was. He would have stood behind his own opinion. And you would drive past him in your car and you'd be like, that guy's a loser. If you don't like the jokes that a comedian's going to tell, just don't go. Yet in social media, if that same dude gets online and he shares some joke from 10 years ago and says, oh my God, look at what Kevin Hart said, or look at what Chris Rock said, or Dave Chappelle said something against the transgender community, then we have to cancel it. So I think by 2020, I think Trump's 100% right on China. I have called out the NBA. I think we're missing the fact that China is far worse today than the Soviet Union was in the 1980s. I think they want to crush us. And I think we have to man up and go toe-to-toe with China. I think the cancel culture is 100% wrong. So whatever opinion you have, say it loudly. If people don't like it, then you can't wipe them out. I am on that perspective. And again, I'm coming from the 80s and not 2000s, where I think we all have way more in common than we do different. And I think we've allowed a tiny cadre of crazy woke people, primarily on social media, to totally destroy and distort our national conversation. So
what about the craziness on the right? Because you know there's crazy people everywhere. Okay, I mean I will concede that some of the stuff in the woke culture, I got you.
Yep.
But on the right, you know, you listen to the Marjorie Taylor Greens and some of the things that she said. I mean, she went on the air, and you know what she said about Democrats on the 60 Minutes. I mean, that was entirely inappropriate and excessive and just out of pocket. You see some of the stuff that's been going on. So my question to you is, what about the folks on the right too? I mean, are you against it all?
Yeah,
are you against it all?
They get mad at me, Stephen A., and they'll probably clip this and they will share it. I'll give you a couple of things where on the crazy right, I don't agree with. And I mean, look, I don't tiptoe up to it. I think the idea that if you get raped, you should have to have a baby, I think it's batshit insane. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, you want to step right into abortion? Like, there's 10% of the population that believes that if you get raped by your dad, you should have to have that baby. I think that's crazy. By the way, there's also 10% of the population that believes you should be able to have an abortion in the 9th month of pregnancy. I think that's crazy. They get mad. So that's, my personal opinion is I'm where most of Americans are on the issue of abortion, for instance. That makes people very uncomfortable because we live, Stephen A., in a world of absolutes where if you don't absolutely commit yourself to one side, then people say, oh, you're disloyal. I think that's dishonest, right? Another one I'll give you. I think Trump lost in 2020. Now,
yes, he did.
They rigged the election. I think there was big tech collusion. I think they didn't share the Hunter Biden story like they should have. I think they changed the rules because of COVID, but Joe Biden got more votes than Donald Trump did to be president. He won the election. People get furious at me for saying that to this day. So I think you have to be willing to say things sometimes that your base level of support gets angry about, right? And I think that to me is honesty. And I always say, sometimes people, and I'm sure you get this sometimes too, will say, I agree with 100% of what you say. And I say, you should think more. Because
that's right.
You should never agree with 100% of what any person says. Never.
Yeah, I don't want anybody agreeing with 100% of what I say. I want them to challenge. It doesn't bother me.
They say, I agree with everything you say. You're not thinking. You're not actually paying attention to everything I say.
Last question to you, because I got to get ready to get on out of here. And I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule because you just finished doing your radio show. So thank you again for your time. Here's the last question that I have for you. You've got to a point now where when you hear the name Clay Travis, you ain't really thinking about sports anymore. You're thinking about a guy that has a lot of potent opinions about a lot of serious matters. And then you're looking at the platform that you have. Fox News, succeeding Rush Limbaugh with Buck Sexton on the EIB net. That's what I'm always call it, EIB net. I'm always call it that. I mean, clearly the position that you're in right now, it comes with a different responsibility. Obviously, because we're thinking about serious life issues, not just games. We have to take it that way. How do you feel about where your career is at and where you're going as it pertains to the lives that you probably will impact along the way in ways that you never would have done discussing sports?
Stephen A., what people say to me now, which I never heard when I did sports, is people come up to me all the time and say, thank you for saying what you are saying. Because I don't feel, every time I speak, I say, hey, how many people in this audience? And I think this goes for every white, black, Asian, Hispanic person in the country as well. How many people in this audience have thought about sharing something on social media and decided not to because you were afraid about what might happen to you if you shared your actual opinion? Every hand in the whole audience goes up. And so I said earlier, I feel like I have a tremendous privilege because I get to say exactly what I believe. And after I sold my company to Fox, I don't ever have to work again, right? I kid my wife with, at some point, I'm just going to grab my phone and throw it as far as I can into the ocean. and just raise my boys and vanish. And she says, you'll never do that. And the answer is probably correct because, Stephen A., I look around and I say, if I wasn't saying what I'm saying, there's almost no one who would be saying it. And so I feel a tremendous privilege to be able to speak exactly what I think every single day. And I would like to think that I can be helpful towards returning the United States to some form of normalcy, to an era where I would love it if 60% of the people, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, would just be like, you know what? I think the president of the United States is doing a pretty good job. And I may not agree with him or her on everything, but 60% of the American population, we had it with George W. Bush for much of his presidency, not at the end for sure, because
of course
Iraq was a disaster and that was a bad,
yes,
which is another thing that sometimes makes people uncomfortable. But he was wrong. We had it with Bill Clinton, and certainly we had it with Ronald Reagan. I would like to believe that we can have it again, and I understand some people are going to disagree, but that is my goal, that we could get to a place where 60% of the American public's like, I think the president's doing a pretty good job.
I can't forget, even though that was supposed to be my last question, this is my last one because I'm dying to hear your answer on this, Clay Travis. I want to know real quick, why Donald Trump? And here's what I mean by that. I believe practically any Republican candidate other than Trump would likely beat Joe Biden.
Yep.
I don't view Joe Biden as receiving 80 million votes. I view it as 80 million people voting against Trump.
Yep.
And so considering how divisive he appears to be, the serious questions about his ability to win a general election, the fact that the Ron DeSantis of the world, to the Liz Cheneys of the world, to the Ted Cruz's of the world would vote practically in lockstep at least over 90% of the time with somebody like Trump. You have people who would implement those similar policies. What is this fixation that so many on the right have with this need for him to be that guy, even though it could potentially cost y'all a general election?
I agree with almost everything you said there. So let me unpack that. I think Trump connects viscerally with a huge segment of Republican and also other non-affiliated voters because Republicans got tired of the Mitt Romneys of the world. The guys who are frankly going to curl up in the fetal position and not stand up as soon as they get attacked. So they like the pugnacious nature of Donald Trump and the fact that he is willing to take things up. My biggest issue with Trump, and I've said this to him, is he's a bull in a china shop. I think he often gets to the right result, but in the process, he just breaks a ton of things along the way. So the argument that you just made is, I think, the exact argument that Ron DeSantis is going to make when he officially announces in June-ish of this year. And I think we're going to see a titanic struggle over the future of the Republican Party between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. And I think it's going to be an absolute Donnybrook. And the argument that you're making is the number one argument that DeSantis is going to make. I am a more effective version of Trump. He already lost to Biden. I will kick Biden's ass if you put me in that ring. Trump is going to argue that he is going to beat Biden because he's going to argue that he didn't actually lose in 2020. But I think you're hitting at it. I think there's a strong argument to be made that I always think of like this. You watched the Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Do you remember the trial by combat?
No, I'm sorry.
Trial by combat, you would get to pick your fighter and they fight for you, right?
Yes. Yes.
I love Game of Thrones, right? Mm-hmm. If Democrats could pick the Republican nominee, they would pick Donald Trump. And I would just say to anybody out there thinking, doesn't mean you can't make a bad choice, because in 2016, Democrats would have made the same choice and Trump beat Hillary. Mm-hmm. Trump could beat Biden. But if your opponent is saying, we want this guy, you should definitely contemplate, why are they trying to make that pick?
Yeah. Especially since some of the folks he supported in the midterms lost.
Oh,
Clay,
2022 was a disaster when it came
to
the toss-up states.
I am not surprised at how thoroughly I enjoyed this conversation. I could have talked to you for the next hour. I appreciate your time, my man. Thank you so much. Learned a lot talking to you, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. And like I said, listen, there's a lot more stuff that we could get into, but I wanted my audience to learn about you. So I think that you did a great job of doing that.
A home and home. I will bring you on and I'll ask you all the questions. And by the way, I'll say this for you.
Sure.
Be texting Stephen A. or blowing him up on Twitter because you disagree with me on something. We should have more conversations between people of a variety of different backgrounds, conversations, as opposed to this idea of, oh, if you talk to so-and-so, you agree with everything he or she says.
Please.
That's bullshit.
Yeah. Total bullshit. I appreciate your time, man. I'm looking forward to coming on your show. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Sure, I appreciate it, my man. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Hiring is intimidating, plain and simple. It's a big decision. Choosing the people you're going to work with every day because your team matters. If you ever watched the Spurs, you know that team chemistry makes a difference. And that's why over 3 million businesses use Indeed. It's the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, or hire all in one place and really get to know who you're hiring. Their powerful tools let you do it all on one website, like virtual interviews, assessments, and my favorite, Indeed matching. When you sponsor a job, Indeed will instantly match you with quality candidates whose resumes fit your job description. No waiting, no questionable candidates. And Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/mercy to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/mercy. Indeed.com/mercy. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. In case you didn't know, I can talk. Actually, I can talk for hours and hours and hours on end. I got a lot to say. That's how it goes. But there's a whole world of people out there, and sometimes I wish I could reach more of them and share my thoughts and opinions with those halfway across the globe. And that's where Rosetta Stone would be able to help. They've been the expert in language learning for 30 years, and their award-winning app lets you learn anytime, anywhere. You can pick from 25 languages: Spanish, Italian, Chinese, Arabic, Dutch, and more, and make real progress in as little as 10 minutes. They know your time is valuable, so their bite-sized lessons prepare you for real-life interactions, not just vocab. Whether you want to travel or experience new cultures or whatever the reason, this is the immersive learning experience for you. For a limited time, our listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime unlimited subscription, which gives you access to all 25 of their languages forever for 40% off. Visit rosettastone.com/mercy today. Rosetta Stone, how language is learned. Hey guys, Stephen A. here. I've autographed copies of my new book, Straight Shooter, exclusively for Premier Collectibles. And now for a limited time, you can use code SAS15 to save 15% at checkout. That's SAS15 for 15% off at checkout. Head over to StephenABook.com and get your signed copy today. Thanks again to Clay Travis. Really appreciated that time, that interview. A lot of stuff that he had to say. Very interesting, very compelling. Can't deny it. We'll get into all of that at a later date. I got to get on out of here, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, you don't have to know sports to know mercy. I just proved it yet again. There's always a lot to talk about. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, No Mercy Podcast. Check it out. Okay, Stephen A. Smith, No Mercy. I got to get on out of here. Until next time, peace and love, everybody.